I've lived in Victoria most of my life. I don't think I understand the state anymore, because either Victorians have lost their mind, or Victoria's Liberal Party is so weak that you wouldn't even vote for it to save your life. I mean, the latest Newspoll, Premier Daniel Andrews cruising to another landslide win. His third state election victory in a row as support for the Liberal leader fails. Now, Andrews is way ahead, even though he imposed the cruellest and longest pandemic lockdowns in the country and still had the most deaths per capita. And then there's his scandals and his secrecy, how his Labor Party stole nearly $400,000 from taxpayers by getting them to pay for Labor candidates, then try to, stall an investigation. His disastrous plan just the other day to build a useless train line circling Melbourne's outer suburbs, now estimated to cost, get this, $150 billion more than Andrews first promised. And it's now going to cost far more than it's worth. And this when the state debt is already blowing out to an estimated $167 billion, again, by far the biggest in the country. And after all that, how could Victorians say they'd rather have more of Dan Andrews than a new start with the Liberals? Joining me is Jeff Kennett, the last Liberal Premier to win 2 terms, and did that by not saying me too to Labor, by the way. Jeff Kennett, thank you so much for your time. After everything that Daniel Andrews has done, the lockdowns, the debts, the scandals, the blowouts, can you explain why the Liberals are cruising to an absolute hiding in 3 months and then Andrews will be Premier again?
Andrew, can I just refer you back to 1999? The opinion polls indicated the week out from the election that my government was going to be returned with an increased majority of 6%. We lost that election. We won more seats than Labor, but 3 independents sided with Labor and the government changed. I have great faith in the community of Victoria that the time has arrived for a change in government. So therefore, I'm not concerned about these opinion polls, because what they will do to the Labor government is what they did to me in 1999. People will feel Labor is going to be returned. They will be horrified at the thought, based on the record that you've just articulated, and they will remove them from office. Well, I like your optimism. I'm not sure that this time I see it, but you're quite right to point us to that 1999 outcome. Why do you think then the polls are not reflecting what you think will happen? Well, I just think that's what they are. They are polls. As I move around the community, there are people out there who are increasingly annoyed, not frustrated, annoyed, and they want to see a change of government. And Daniel Andrews, being the face of the government, is the one that they are most personally venting their anger at. So I am quite sure that on polling day, you and I will see a change of government in the same way that we saw a change of government federally. Change is often good to refresh the governing body of the day, but more so in these circumstances because of the sorts of things that you outlined, Andrew. And it's not just policy issues, it's the way in which the government has been run, the public lockdown, the corruption that's been found by independent bodies of this government. And the community have got to decide whether they're going to support more of that behaviour or whether they've had enough of it. For if that behaviour is rewarded with another election victory for Labor, then that level of behaviour will continue and the state will continue to bear one hell of a pain for the next 4 years and probably beyond, because already people are leaving the state. Our community is shrinking and people are restless, they're concerned. Our reputation has actually stopped so many people even thinking of returning to Victoria. They're worried. Unlike South Australia, who only had 10 lockdown days, we had 264. People are fearful of what the future holds under this government.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing you say this, because I was thinking, God, Victoria, either I don't understand Victoria or it's changed completely since I came here. I mean, when I first moved to Melbourne, it was the arts capital, it was the fashion capital. None of the thing is true now. It had a dynamism, that's gone. There's a sourness to the culture. And I was thinking, what's happened to Victorians? Have they been, you know, like beaten into submission, that they're now licking the boots of the Premier that's beaten them to a pulp with these lockdowns, etc.? I tell you what, there's a sinister edge to this state that was really getting me down. I've moved out of Melbourne. I was thinking maybe I should have joined this exodus out of the state. Do you think the culture has changed? Well, do you really, or do you think that people are waking up?
No, I do think the culture has changed. When you start destroying the fabric of the democratic process, when you start abusing the Westminster system on which we have based our government, you bring down the whole community. The people who should be setting the standards have been abusing the standards for their own personal benefit. Again, you go back to before their election in 2014 when they misused public money. And there's been this continual stream of inquiries and activities where the government has been found to have been embracing corrupt practices. Now, if the so-called moral leadership of the state itself is corrupt, then you pull down the whole society. And people are, as you said, beaten down. They're exhausted. And that's why I hope and I have great faith that when the time comes, the only opportunity, Andrew, we have as a public to vent our spleen, to actually correct and uphold again the things that matter to us, is at an election. And therefore, I remain optimistic that when the date comes, I think it's November the 24th, that the public will say enough is enough. We cannot continue to destroy the wonderful base that this state has had for so long under governments of all persuasion. It's just this government who for 8 years has been held to account and being found to support corrupt practices. Even if you forgot the policy issues of rundown in our health system, or the expenditure on infrastructure projects that we can't afford, or the size of our debt, in one sense, all those policy issues to me are secondary from the quality of the government that leads a country or a state. And the quality of the government here, sadly, has never, ever been lower.
I'm not going to let you go without one last thing. The Liberals, I think we can't treat the Liberals too softly here. A lot of Liberal supporters tell me they're disappointed, and as am I, that the Liberals now in Victoria do not fight for their basic principles. They say me too to too many things, like they've endorsed emission targets
Andrew, who says that to you
tougher even than Victoria, than Anthony Albanese's. I mean, how does that happen?
Well, as I said, the pendulum in politics always swings. And what happened federally was a swinging of the pendulum. And to their credit, I think the federal government, under Mr Albanese, has done well since they were elected. And I think their Treasurer has been talking the right sort of language. We will know more about that when they bring their budget down in October. But to date, I give them credit. But please remember, it's not just a criticism I think you're making of the Liberal Party, and it's always difficult in opposition. It's a criticism of the media, who have allowed so many instances to go without giving it more coverage than one day. There's been no anger among the media. The media have become sycophants to the government when there has been so much abuse of the standards by which I think you and I both live, and I exercised as a Premier and a politician for 23 years. Oppositions never win government. Governments lose. And the question you and I and your viewers have got to ask ourselves, does this government deserve, has it earned the right to be re-elected? That's the decision we'll be making on the 24th of November.
Jeff Kennett, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for your time.